Welcome, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. We're here today to address your curiosity about how the Inflation Reduction Act can help your multifamily retrofit project. We're excited that you're here to engage in a discussion about how renewable energy, electrification, and energy rebates and the tax credits in the IRA might help accelerate and propel decarbonization in multifamily housing retrofits. I am here today with some of my RMI colleagues. My name, if you do not know me already, is Eva Rosenbloom, and David Smedick and I will be presenting today. We work together on RMI's carbon-free building team, which supports market transformation and policy transformation in existing building decarbonization. The IRA, as many of you are aware, is one of the most significant legislation that is passed in US history, and it offers an unprecedented opportunity to lower energy costs, increase investment in clean energy, stimulate jobs and economic growth, and it will help put this building sector on a decarbonization path. But more importantly, it has a lot of provisions for underserved and disadvantaged communities. It's our goal and intent today to kind of break the grandness of the IRA down and demystify the pieces and parts so that we can focus specifically on which benefits apply to affordable multifamily housing retrofits, which will take us into our agenda. We'll review the applicable sections in the IRA that relate to affordable multifamily housing retrofits. And then we're going to address some corresponding questions and some needs for clarification for each item. We want to remind you that this presentation is representative of our understanding today. So we talked about the title. Here we are on the IRA. Big bill, lots of things in it. We're gonna focus down. And then here it is, our agenda. So like I said, we're going to review the specific sections of the IRA that applies to you. Then we're going to go through questions and clarification that we already see and that we're going to be looking for in the future. And then we're going to take those applications and then apply them to an actual project example, and then talk about potential other sources of fundings. Barring no more technical difficulties, we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So we're hoping to address what other questions you have. Technically, during the process, you're more than welcome to put your questions in the chat. During the Q&A, LM Murray will be reviewing what's in the chat, but then you'll have an opportunity to come off mute if you would like to speak in person.
All right, thanks, Eva. I'm gonna steer us for a couple of slides and then hand it back off to Eva. So yeah, really appreciate everybody being here again. As Eva mentioned, my name's David Smedick. I'm on the Carbon Free Buildings team at RMI and excited to chat with you all today. As Eva mentioned, there is a lot within the Inflation Reduction Act for all sectors of the economy related to climate change and decarbonization work. And there's, even within the building sector, there are numerous programs that received funding, whether it's incentive tax credits and incentives, whether it's grant proposals, whether it's rebates. What we're trying to do today is to highlight 4 specific programs and then touch on a couple others later. But 4 programs that can be most relevant, we think, to affordable multifamily housing retrofit projects. And the first, we're going to highlight the 2 rebate programs as well as 2 of the tax incentive programs as well. The first one to highlight in the rebate bucket is the HOMES program, an energy efficiency program, which has a variety of tiers, which we'll touch on in a second, but you can get up to $8,000 per apartment and unit for energy savings. This is more of a measured and performance-based approach, whereas the other rebate program, the High Efficiency Electric Home Rebate Program, or HERA, you might hear it referred to, is an appliance rebate program. So both of these rebates, again, are direct consumer rebates, but the High Efficiency Electric Home Rebate Program is focused specifically on appliance electrification, with a couple addendums onto that related to panel upgrades or a few other efficiency portions, but it's really about heat pumps, induction cooktops, heat pump hot water heaters, those kinds of programs and appliances. And you can receive up to $14,000 per unit for installation of efficient electric appliances. One other key difference I'll highlight quickly on the HERA program is that it is a rebate tied specifically to low and moderate income households. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. Next up, on the tax incentive side, we've got tax credit 45L, the Home's Energy Efficiency Tax Credit. This is for new construction, especially for new homes and major renovations, obviously, if we're talking about big retrofit work, but significant renovation and kind of new construction opportunities here. And we're seeing anywhere from $500 to $5,000 per unit, depending on the pathway you take related to prevailing wage or efficiency achievements within there. And then lastly, we'll touch on the renewable energy tax credit 48 for some of the bigger projects associated with that, not utility scale, but still not your single family rooftop kind of production tax credit here. So there's a lot of good opportunities to stack together different incentives within 45 or 48 that we can get related to renewable energy for affordable housing retrofit projects. Really important also to note here, the two subsets here, you've noticed we colored them a little differently on the slide. That's because they're administered by different agencies, both within the federal and the state government. The rebate programs, the states are going to be the driving force of actually administering these programs. So we're in the process right now working with the Department of Energy to reply to a variety of different requests for information on how those programs will be guided by the federal government. But your state energy offices are going to be the key groups that actually develop their programs and administer the programs based on the Department of Energy guidance. So that's one key piece. And then the tax credits, pretty straightforward, but your Treasury Department of the federal government and the IRS are going to be the ones that are really actually handling the paperwork and administering those. We're starting to see some guidance flow out, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. Not so much on these two tax credits yet, but we are excited about their development. So we've got state program administration and then a whole bunch of federal and IRS work associated with the tax side of things. So a little bit more info on the rebate programs first. The HOMES program, again, this is a performance-based rebate program. It's designed to have households save between 20 and 45% of their energy use. It's going to be, again, administered by those state energy offices. And the funding is really supposed to last through the decade. It could be spent quicker, it could be stretched out longer. That again will depend on how the state energy office is really going to administer those funds. But we are looking to have this money hopefully soon for folks. There are increased tiered structures for the rebates related to low and moderate income households. And we have this applying to both energy savings efforts, your envelope upgrades, as well as equipment upgrades. So a variety of things could qualify to make sure that you do hit those performance targets related to the energy savings within the HOMES rebate program. This is a complicated program. There's going to be a lot more information coming from the Department of Energy soon. This is kind of what we've seen in statute again. Depending on which pathway you're talking about and the energy savings you're receiving, you can get, again, to $4,000 to $8,000 per unit associated with this rebate program. And again, at the bottom here, we do have the note for how they're defining low income within this program in particular. Next one, we've got a little bit more detail on the high efficiency electric home rebate program. Again, this is the appliance electrification rebate program. Similarly, this is actually very specifically and only eligible for households that are 150% or lower of the area median income. And there are some tiered structures around that. You can get 50% of costs covered if you're in the 80 to 150% area median income, and if you're below 80% of the area median income, you can get 100% of the cost covered up to certain levels, whether it's $8,000 for a heat pump, $840 for an induction stovetop, or totally $14,000 across the board. So again, this is what we're excited to see within the electric home rebate program. And again, this is one that the state energy offices will have a lot of structure around in the coming months as DOE puts out further guidance. Eva, I think you're going to cover this part, right? Yeah.
So thank you, David. So here are our 2 slides worth of questions and clarifications that we still have, that we're still waiting for guidance on the rebate problems or rebate programs. One of the big things is if you can stack homes in HERA. There's definitely some overlap between the benefits and the qualifying eligibility purchases of homes and HERA, and it's still very much unclear if you can take advantage of both. We're hoping that you'll be able to do the envelope improvements in homes and then the electrical equipment rebates in HERA to make the benefit of both things. But that's still a large question mark that the state agency will in this case in Massachusetts would be DEOER, will be able to clarify. We're also unclear of things like details like what's the baseline for energy use for that definition for the 20 to 45% energy savings. It's also unclear if the 14,000 max is a one-time life. Can you spread it over multiple years, or would be very advantageous if you can max it out 1 year, and then if there's still funds available and still scope available, that taking advantage of even more. We do know that rebates will not be retroactive, so we're still trying to figure out what's the sweet spot of starting construction without jeopardizing your eligibility, but how much, but we do know that you cannot install the equipment and then go back for the rebate. And the contractor rebate is a one-time per project, will be in addition to the 14,000. So that's good news. Other clarification items is that the DOER will be issuing an RFI for this program sometime, we hope by the end of this month, this January. We don't have any other details on the application process, but this is a good time to submit and advocate for development of multifamily benefit programs. It will be split, the big lump sum money will be split with single family, so advocating for development of the multifamily programs individually will be a key action to do. We do know that these rebates won't change or diminish as times, but states have a finite bucket of money that and once it's gone, the funds may run out before the time is there. And the good news is we're hopeful that many of the states will have the funds by the end of this calendar year. And then David, I think you're gonna talk about 45L briefly.
Yep, thanks, Eva. So the quick overview that we just provided on the rebate programs, we try to give the information we have again and the questions that are still remaining. So we're hoping, as Eva was mentioning, to get a lot more information over the coming months, especially with some requests for information that are coming out from the U.S. Department of Energy here in the next week or two, hopefully. That'll help us understand what they're thinking a little bit more, and then we'll get the guidance after that. But on the tax credit side as well, we again understand that the 45L energy efficient home tax credit, again for new constructions, major renovations, those kinds of things. This tax credit has been around in the past. It received some upgrades within the Inflation Reduction Act. It's tied again specifically to the Energy Star program and the Zero Energy Ready Home program at the U.S. Department of Energy. So making sure that the homes and units meet those standards are really kind of what this energy tax credit are tied to. One of the things that I really like to highlight that is a bigger change within the Inflation Reduction Act are the kind of the third and fourth bullets here related to the 45L tax credit. In the past, it's been very difficult, if not disadvantageous, to stack together the 45L tax credit with the low-income housing tax credit. There is now change within the Inflation Reduction Act, thanks to advocacy from a wide variety of actors, that does allow the LIHTC tax credit and the 45L tax credit to be stacked without reducing basis under the LIHTC program. So that was really exciting to see. exact guidance on that, on how all of that will work more specifically, will come from the IRS in the coming weeks, hopefully, as well as there's updates for direct paid nonprofit entities. And again, the key thing here is aligning the building performance qualification programs, the Energy Star construction and the DOE Zero Energy Ready Home program. That's how you actually achieve the incentives within this tax credit, which I think our next slide actually details a little bit more. Yeah, specifically, there's a range here anywhere from $500 to $5,000 per unit, depending on which program you meet, and if you receive and work with prevailing wage structures that I believe have been detailed by the IRS in some guidance recently. But again, we're going to find out a little bit more from the IRS on this program in the coming weeks. We were hopeful that additional guidance from 45L and 48 would come out over the winter holidays. We saw some IRS programs provide new and updated guidance on IRA programs and tax incentives over that time period, but the 45L and the next credit we'll talk about, 48, were not in that first batch that was delivered from the IRS. So we're still waiting on some of the nuances to be delivered from Treasury Department on these programs, but we do know this, it's a big opportunity, and some of those changes that were detailed, like I mentioned on the LIHTC stacking, is a breakthrough that we're really excited about when it comes to affordable multifamily retrofits.
And then a little bit more detail on what the Energy Star, just kind of high level, what that really means. There's Energy Star for new construction, but there's also Energy Star for existing buildings. And the program requirements right now for existing buildings are that you would use a portfolio manager to compare against similar building type energy usage. So a building would need to categorize all its energy use and calculate its EUI for a full 12-month calendar year. And then it's scored upon a ranking of 1 to 100, and a number 75 would comply for the Energy Star Energy Star qualification. They qualify multifamilies as 20 units or more, but moving forward, we don't know whether that would be changing. The DOE Energy Ready Home is a little bit higher threshold of energy performance. And so your baseline here is that you would meet the Energy Star construction qualifications, but then upgrade in the thermal envelope and the HVAC performance rating. To note, if you were to do a retrofit of passive house or close to passive house energy levels and qualifications, it would most likely definitely qualify for the DOE Energy Ready Home qualifications. Their specific existing multifamily requirements are still on their website, still being determined. So that would be a question. We'll move right into the 48, which has been called a commercial investment tax credit. And it is also being called transitioning to the clean energy investment tax credits. But it's all commonly known as how to get solar and geothermal and battery storage on your property. The reason they're changing the name is in the commercial investment tax credits, they've kind of allocated and written out what all the things that would qualify. And then when we transition to the clean energy investment, it's much more technology neutral. It's pretty much all generation facilities that would lower GHG. So it's a little bit more inclusive, but most of the things that are listed are what we're looking at. So the clean energy tax credit here is projects under 1 megawatt. Same thing with 45L. Through these benefits are available now. The base credits are available now through 2031. This is applicable to municipalities, commercial, nonprofit, and third-party owned residential units. The difference here is now that you can take advantage of a direct pay refund, so you don't have a tax liability against it, and it can be a refund payment. It is also set up with a base credit of 30% and then a series of bonus add-ons. And those bonuses are domestic content, energy, community, low-income residents or community also, which I'll describe in the next slide. And just note that these bonuses will be a competitive application through the IRS or the Treasury Department. So here's a kind of a layout of how these bonuses could stack. So your base credit is 30%, and then domestic and energy community are 10. And then with a low-income community or a low-income residential building or economic benefit projects, those are kind of an either or. It was varying between 10 and 20. To note here that the low-income community, residential, and economic benefit projects are only available for solar and wind and not the other technologies. So theoretically, if you complied with 4 of these, you could stack all the way to 70%. But most likely, the multifamily, but a 50% is probably very viable. So the domestic content means that the panels are made mostly in the US, that 100% of the steel is a US produced material and 40% of the manufactured products. So hopefully more solar markets will come to the market and we'll have more availability in supply chain. Energy community means it's a previously designated at a brownfield site, or that it's located in areas of fossil fuel production and has at an unemployment rate of under the national average, or it was a census tract where there was a closed coal or coal-fired electric plant. So the low-income community, again, for solar and wind projects only, these projects are in low-income communities as defined by the IRS, and it's roughly the at or below 80% AMI. The low-income residential projects are rental buildings that participate in a housing program, and the financial benefits of the electricity produced are allocated to the residents. This is also an area that we're trying to figure out where more clarification is needed on the definition of what that essentially means. And then the difference between the residential and the economic benefit classification is that the residential on a building is for the residential, but the low income economic benefit project could be a community solar that also shares the benefits with the community. It doesn't necessarily have to be on a housing building. So lots of questions with 45L and 48. Again, we're still waiting for guidance on how nonprofits can access that direct pay refund, when that would flow into your into the calendar project. Clarification on the definition of major renovations in 45L from the DOE or the EPA. Designation of what a multifamily really is. The 48, the competitive add-ons for the Treasury Department, what that will entail. There's no yet details on that process. You can take the 30% right today, but we're not sure about the other, and we're hoping for more guidance soon. So all of that information, a lot to take in. Let's try to see how this affects the project. Today we're gonna apply all the benefits to a project that would be under construction probably by the end of this year. It's in Boston. It's using non-prevailing wage. It's 20 units. The EUI energy savings is projected about 69%. So we're exceeding that 45% energy savings from the homes rebate. The whole mechanical system will be replaced with an all-electric system and include some electrical service upgrades. And we're going to maximize the solar on this project. This project is, the total development cost is almost $6 million, 5.9. It has some committed funding and some anticipated funding that is still remaining a gap of almost 1.2, 1.17. That anticipated funding does include what we're expecting from the lean multifamily utility incentives, which leading to our gap at 1.17. It's about 20% of the development cost, which is amounting to about $58,000 per unit. So applying the IRA here too, we're going to assume that we can stack homes in here. And we're going to assume that homes we can allocate for the envelope improvements only, and we would achieve that 45% energy savings that is listed in here as 8,000 per dwelling unit. And so when we multiply that, we get 160,000. And then if we look at the HERA electrification rebate for all the equipment, we're going to assume that we're going to get the electrical equipment and the upgrade for the panel. And we're going to max that out. Since this property would qualify for at or lower than 80% AMI. So we'll assume 100% of the cost at 14,000, which equals 280,000. And then 45L on the tax credit, where it is a non-prevailing wage in this case. And we were, since our energy usage is significant, we are almost at passive house levels. So we're pretty confident that we would fall into the DOE zero energy ready home classification, which would give us another 20 grand. Obviously with the prevailing wage, we'd increase that to 100 if that was the case. With the solar that's anticipated for the rooftop, is that value is around 260,000. So if we look at 30 to 60% of that solar capability, you're looking at 78 to 156,000. So adding all these potential benefits up, we're above the $500,000 range, which could be a significant push for this project. So if we go back to our funding gap at 1.17, and we start to subtract the IRA rebates at 440,000 and the IRA tax credits, I'm going to assume in this case that they would get the base 30% on their solar and then qualify for the 20% low income residential bonus, and which brings the whole project down. So our new gap is almost in half here at 580,000, which is coming down to 10% or 29,000 per unit, which is more reasonable to tackle hitting the streets for finding other potential fundings. Which brings us to our next section, other possible sources of funding that are available either now, pretty soon, or pretty close on the horizon. Many of them are included on the IRA, which will help benefit many of these projects. The one, since we'll speak specifically about Massachusetts, just on a very high level of what's available now, $20 million is been appropriated to the Mayor's Office of Housing for Boston properties. Now this fund there's been portions of it earmarked for Boston Housing Authority properties, and the remaining 15 million will be kind of split between multifamily and single family, but there are opportunities there to take advantage of that funds. The DOER just released a press release about $50 million for decarbonization of multifamily retrofits. That program will be rolling out soon. There's not a lot of details on requirements and application process, but we should be seeing that with moving forward within a couple months. The IRA has some embedded funding to help more of the affordable multifamily housing projects. HUD has a green and resilient retrofit fund. It's about $1 billion coming online, along with $27 billion allocated to the EPA GHG reduction fund in terms of grants and loans for financing. And then again, in Massachusetts, a little bit future, we're hoping to see the zero carbon renovation fund come to fruition very soon. And David's going to give a little high level explanation of what the HUD is.
Yeah, thanks, Eva. So again, within the Inflation Reduction Act, Housing and Urban Development at the federal level was provided about $1 billion to kind of, I think this is an older program. It wasn't around when I was working on this space before, but the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program, this kind of thing has been delivered by HUD in the past, but a new $1 billion in grant money for the opportunity to additionally leverage even more funds, up to $4 billion, I believe, in some loan work. So the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program is something we're really excited about, including energy and water benchmarking, low emission and zero emission technologies, and improvements to, again, both the energy and water efficiency, indoor air quality, and climate resilience work associated with the HUD programs. So they are in the process of finalizing guidance for this program. A number of organizations and advocates and experts and industry representatives have been talking to HUD through formal channels, including the request for information process that closed in October from HUD for this program. And we are hoping to see guidance on how this money will be spent, application processes for projects, et cetera, to work with HUD to really get this program moving. $1 billion is a lot, and it's also not a lot in the grand scheme of things. So it will, as this new program starts to roll out and this new funding does, we definitely encourage folks to pay attention if your project may qualify for it, because it could move quickly, but it's a really big opportunity for folks to dive into. Lots more to be excited about as HUD starts to review and release their guidance on this program. The next program we wanted to highlight, and there are still a lot of question marks around this one too. I feel like a broken record when it comes to Inflation Reduction Act on that, but there is some details that we can provide that we're excited about related to this pot of flexible funds flowing to the EPA. And again, it totals up to about $27 billion between grants and financing options for a variety of greenhouse gas reduction opportunities. You may have heard this floated out there as the Green Bank program. That's again because a lot of this money will flow to a subset of Green Bank style or financing entities, but there are some grant opportunities as well within it, really focused on investing in low-income, environmental justice and disadvantaged communities to reduce emissions within there. We do anticipate and are advocating for and pushing EPA and eventually the other administrators of the funds to have and highlight and really promote and prioritize investing these funds in the built environment. We think it's a really strong argument to be highlighting equity concerns as well as the decarbonization efforts within different states and localities for this. So we don't know exactly where all this money is going to land in terms of which entities will receive it, but the EPA did have, again, a request for information process that closed early in the winter, and we are expecting to see updates from them soon. They are statutorily required to at least start administering some funds as soon as February of this year. So we should get a bit more information soon, but we definitely encourage folks to stay up to speed, and we'll be sharing more information as it's available. But there is an opportunity here for an even bigger pot of money from the EPA specifically and through different entities at the local level eventually to invest in different projects again.
And then our last descriptive slide on the funding is the Massachusetts Zero Carbon Renovation Fund. We're hoping to get past $300 million in this legislative session, so we're hoping to move quickly. We're still very unclear on timing. Again, no real guidance available on types of incentives per dwelling unit or program requirements, but they will be heavily focused on buildings located in EJ communities. We invite you and encourage you to join the coalition. The link will be attached to the slides, and we have Emily Jones on the call today from LISC if you have any other questions in the Q&A section. So the timeline here, yep.
Yeah, I'll do it quick, but then feel free to chime in, sorry. The IRA timeline is really focused on the next decade in particular. And there's kind of staggered throughout the timeline of when funds will be released by federal agencies, when they have to be spent on the ground. In the case of the tax credits, again, those tax credits on the whole, they are not capped at an aggregate level. So for each project, you can only get so much within the incentive structure, but there's no limit to how often, really in the grand scheme of things, how often they can be utilized. across the board. So those last between now and the end of the decade, or turn into the 2030s. The grant programs have a little bit more structure around them, and when the funds run out, the funds run out. But we highlighted especially, again, as we noted, the homes in HERA, the rebate programs. DOE has, the U.S. Department of Energy has detailed their plans to actually, by the end of this year, their goal is that the funds for those rebate programs are available to consumers. So that will require their guidance to be out over the next couple months, and then the states to apply for the funds soon after that. DOE to review the program proposals and then release the funds to the states later in the year. The date that we have in there is the statutory requirement for which the deadline for when states will have had to develop and apply for these funds. But we expect that again, money and program structure will be accelerated than that August 2024 date. So we're anticipating a lot more news from DOE early, and that's why we wanted to throw this up for you all to recognize 2023 will be the year that these programs are really pulled together, and hopefully money starts flowing out the door before the end of the calendar year.
And then we encourage you, there's lots of other webinars and resources that have been submitted, especially when it comes to stacking other types of incentives, whether it's local to your area or state. Build Environment Plus out of Massachusetts put up a nice webinar last month about stacking all of these incentives, both utility and the IRA. There's a Passive House IRA funding coming up next week also, and then the DOE regularly has some roundtables specifically around the rebates. So we encourage you to keep looking and keep in touch. And that concludes what we have today. So thank you and good luck with your project, and we will open it up for questions. We have about 15 minutes available now.
Awesome. Thank you, Eva and David, for such a great presentation. So as Eva said, my name is Ella Mirai. I'm with RMI's Carbon Free Buildings program, and I'm going to be helping monitor the Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or if you have a more lengthy question or you just want to ask it directly, feel free to raise your hand and I can allow you to unmute yourself. So just to start things off, we have two questions so far. The first one from Mary Ellen, kind of looking towards some next steps. Her question is, will you have any type of report or piece that we can share with building owners?
Well, maybe, let's see. So first, we will be able to share the slides and the recording on a short-term basis. I think since there's a lot of moving pieces within the next couple months, we'll have more information to update on a kind of consistent level. So we want to raise awareness that these are the applicable sections and this is a potential thing of what's coming out. There are opportunities, especially with the state agencies, depending on what state you are, to be able to respond with questions, to be able to advocate for this multifamily development program. So it's a little bit more of a moving progress, but stay in touch, definitely. I don't know if either you have anything else to add, but
I would say, if there are specific owners and specific projects that are, serious about moving forward and looking for some additional details as part of that decision-making process, we're also happy to, have conversations with them to help them understand, the opportunities and possibly also help them understand some of the technical solutions that might be appropriate for their projects. So the RMI team is happy to be looped into those conversations if that feels appropriate.
Awesome. Thank you, Eva and Lucas. And our second question is from Zoe. Do we know if any of these funds trigger the new Buy America, Build America requirements?
I can provide a little bit of information on that, and then if others have additional info, please feel free to chime in. I think that we highlighted in the description around 48, the tax credit 48, that there are some pieces related to local manufacturing, related to the renewable energy projects in particular. On the whole, related to the other building upgrades and say as an example, the rebate programs, those are not related and do not trigger from my current knowledge. So we'll caveat that we'll get additional guidance from DOE, but the intent was not to have those trigger some of the same Buy American clauses that say you've heard about maybe with the electric vehicles. There aren't the same kind of requirements around the built environment sections to the same level. Again, with the caveat on the solar pieces that we referenced under tax credit 48. But say like the heat pump, if you want to use the rebate program for it, it doesn't have a manufactured in America requirement. It has some efficiency standards associated with it, say Energy Star for the electric rebate program. All of the appliances would need to at least meet Energy Star standards for that, which makes sense and is pretty standard throughout most of these kinds of laws. But on the domestic manufacturing pieces for the appliances, to my knowledge, it does not apply.
Thank you for that answer. Another question we have is from Lucy. Is this funding going to be considered gap funding? And if so, is there direction on how it is applied to projects that have multiple sources of gap funding?
I don't know the official answer to that, but we can find out, definitely. How do you think?
I think, well, I'll let David add some more color to here, but I think the answer is probably it depends on the requirements of what other sources of gap funding you're thinking about, and then additional details coming out, like the question about stacking that Eva and David pointed to earlier in the presentation. So our hope is that there will be as few restrictions as possible on using multiple sources of funding concurrently. But that's going to depend a little bit, again, on what those sources are and on some additional details that we don't know yet. David, feel free to add anything there.
That was essentially going to be my response as well, Lucas. I think we need additional federal guidance, and then on the rebate programs, state guidance once the programs are developed. So that's an unfortunate wait and see answer, but we'll be keeping an eye on it. It's one of the big things we're questioning.
Another question we have is from Jay. Do the solar benefits apply only to PV panel purchase, or can they also apply to any engineering or capital expenses necessary to meet donage requirements to accommodate the PV panels?
So you're talking about like the infrastructure that would be required to install the PV panels. That would be a great area of clarification as far as the scope goes, but I guess it would depend. My first guess would be that if it was coming from one PV provider and the infrastructure would be included in your scope of work, I would assume that would be included, but that we can put that out for question. What do you think, Lucas?
I think this is probably comparable to when you do like solar carports and that kind of thing, where the support structure, even if it's coming, technically coming from a different vendor, is considered to be basically part of the solar project, because the solar project couldn't happen without it. And in those cases, my understanding is that those additional expenses that are like, reasonably and clearly directly related to the solar project as a whole, are legitimate as part of the basis for the tax credit. Now, obviously I think there's a little bit of a gray line there, and that'll probably come down to your CFO or your tax advisor making a call. But if we're talking about things like solar support structures that are clearly there for almost entirely for the benefit of the solar array, and those kinds of directly related improvements. In my experience, you can carry those as part of the basis.
Great. Another question we have from Catherine is, what kind of resources can be made available to other nonprofit clients, for example, libraries, to help them understand possible funding and rebate sources?
I can chime in a little bit on this and then welcome others to jump in. I think there are a lot of resources currently in development from, frankly, a lot of different organizations, nonprofit groups that are covering this and advocated for the bill. One area that we are doing our best to do, and it's related a little bit to some of the other questions that I'm seeing pop up that we'll get to in more detail, but we're at RMI, we're really trying to orient a lot of our implementation work for some of the built environment provisions within IRA to supporting state energy offices and other state and programs to develop more public education, streamlined application processes, folding together and stacking different funds at the state, local, federal, and utility level. So we're hoping to, in our work, dive into more of how we can be advertising this in a productive way and supporting different projects and state offices that are kind of developing this program. So there's a lot that's in development, some that's already been put out, but I think the next question is, in 2023, it's the big year of, are we laying the groundwork for different projects and different entities to be able to do that? So I think it's also a little bit of a TBD, but it's at the forefront of everybody's mind, is how we get the information into people's hands that can utilize it.
Yeah, and for libraries specifically and other building typologies, I would direct you to that Making Sense of Incentives webinar from Built Environment Plus. It does outline like a library project, and library commercial properties that are for nonprofits that are not multifamily using LATEC. There are other provisions in the IRA for that that would affect those types of projects.
Great. And I think that answered Kristen's question in the chat, but Kristen, if you want to have another clarifying question, just feel free to pose that again. Another question we have from Gregory is, for the IRA related rebate programs, does one need to be a property owner in order to apply, or can non-property owning entities apply as well?
I'm going to lean on my annoying, but still I think true answer of, we're waiting to see some of this on DOE guidance when it relates to exactly how the rebate programs are going to function. There are other programs that we're starting to get more specific details on. For example, we didn't cover it in this presentation because it's not as relevant, but the 25C tax credit is also for the built environment for individual property owners to receive energy efficiency upgrades, including some appliance upgrades like heat pumps. That is for, and we've gotten additional clarification from the IRS around, it's for individual property owners, and say if you're a landlord, you can't access it for each of your units if it's not your primary residence. So we're going to get additional information around the rebate programs for this. But the rebate programs, I think it will be really interesting to see how they go. One highlight, I think, that is within there for contractors in particular, I wanted to pull out because Eva mentioned it, but I like to always reinforce this. There is a specific incentive structure that's outside of the direct appliance rebates for contractors that do the work for some of those rebate programs. So the electrification rebate program, as an example, a contractor can actually receive up to $500 for even just doing the work, and that's in addition to the up to 14,000. So exactly how that will work as well is going to be up to the states, but there are some nuances that we're still waiting to see around this, around how exactly the rebate programs will function.
Thank you, David. And I'm just going to address Kristen's comment again, because I don't know if you mentioned it in depth, David, but her question was, is the intention that IRA offers to be used in conjunction with utility incentive programs?
From my perspective, yes. It's not statutorily written anywhere that the IRA has to stack together with utility incentives. But what we are really trying to focus in on is what we described here is how you're layering together funds for specific projects. The other bucket that we didn't highlight because it wasn't, say a federal government or a Massachusetts state government program through that way is utility incentives and other financing structures. All of the different barriers or whatever into that are critically important to understand, but we do definitely want to see as much as possible streamlined opportunities for folks to stack and braid together different incentive programs to get as much funding as possible for projects. So that will depend on specific state regulatory laws and everything around the incentives for that. But hopefully we see projects leverage the different funds together.
Yeah, the project example that I used assumed that those utility incentives would be applied,
Wonderful.
and
Great.
then the IRA. Yes.
Awesome. Thanks for that clarification. And then we have another question from Anne. She's wondering if roof replacement might qualify under the solar benefit.
I just put a typed answer to that question. So, Anne, let me know if that doesn't answer your question.
Thank you, Lucas, for being on top of that. We have another question from Robert then. Do you have any sense of how long the EPA Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund or Green Bank funds would flow from states, especially Massachusetts?
Robert, that is a hot question in this space, which is probably why you wanted to ask it, because there's a lot of questions around exactly how those funds are going to start flowing down and when. I wish I had a better answer. We've heard everything from folks advocating for the EPA to get those $27 billion or the financing pieces of it to a single national green bank that's formed, which then flows out to localities and states. We've heard people against that. And so that is a big TBD. Wish I had a better answer. But we will see, I think, a lot more from EPA over the next few weeks based on some statutory deadlines they need to start meeting. So hopefully Massachusetts can start to take advantage of it soon, but we don't know exactly how or through which entities.
Awesome. I think we're up to date with questions now. Again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand or continue putting them in the chat. We've had a lot of people jumping in with answers in the chat, which has been very helpful. So thank you, everyone. We have a question on windows. I don't know what that specifically is referring to, but.
G, what do you, let me take you off. Oh, replacing single pane windows. Well, in that case, I mean, so the homes rebate is based on energy savings, and it's rated at 20%, achieving 20% and 45%. So windows and envelope improvement to air, ceiling, and insulation, those would all directly apply to that rebate. So it would be up to was that 8,000 an apartment, a unit, depending on or up to energy savings. And then you can tack on and then with those energy savings, get your Energy Star or DOE classification and get that other tax credit.
Another question we have is, do any of the funds go towards hydropower?
So that might be, I'm just pulling up my slide, might be open for conversation on the itemized list of the commercial investment tax credit. We can double check if hydropower is included in that. So again, you would be limited to the 1 megawatt project. As it transitions to the clean energy investment tax credit, where the terms are more neutral, you could make the argument that that would apply as long as that project would be under that size.
Awesome. So we have about a minute left. If there's any other last minute questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If not, Eva, you can have the last words if you'd like.
No, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and know that we're moving forward and gathering information at all times, and we'll be following up, like I said, with the slides and any other resources that we can come up with. But I don't hesitate to encourage you to reach out if there's any specific things that we can help you with, or dig deeper, but also just so you know how to advocate for yourself and your project. But things are coming, and 2023 is going to be an exciting year, so good news. So I just saw that one last question. Does this apply to the individual homeowner? So there are a whole other set of tax incentives and rebates that would apply for the single family home, which we didn't address today, but that do exist. So, yeah. Well, if that's the case, thank you so much for attending, everyone, and have a great long weekend.